Science and technology and innovation, these are indispensable in the modern economy, in the modern world.
The meeting at the MSI, and we resolved among about 6 to 8 of us, local members, first to form PAASE Philippines so that we could continue to host meetings here, but also to go on a massive campaign to try to get support from the national government through the legislative and executive branches to invest more in science and technology. So it started with a white paper, a position paper that we co-authored among 6 of us, namely Ernie Pernia, Cesar Saloma, Rador Asansa, Toby Dairita Fataneo, and Alvin Colaba de la Sala, and myself.
So PAASE historically, in the past 10, 20 years for sure, have been collaborating with our counterparts here in the Philippines at various universities. And a lot of these interactions probably started as peer-to-peer. But thankfully, we have the Department of Science and Technology here in the Philippines, and they've come up with some really helpful and very impactful programs that actually enable PAASE members that are based in the United States and other parts of the world to actually come here and do extensive research and academic partnerships and collaborations.
Well, I think that one of the good things that PAASE is doing is really trying to stay in touch with the researchers and the scientists here in the Philippines. So I think that is one of the good programs that they keep on supporting some of the initiatives of our researchers and scientists here in the country, trying to align also their assistance towards the plans of the Philippine government.
It's very important that the PAASE members and scientists based in the Philippines are continuously in contact, so we will know the needs of the Filipinos and opportunities that Filipinos can have to do science with their PAASE counterparts. So these interactions, such as the conference that we're holding and the annual conferences that we have.
The Philippines and the scientists there have very unique perspective that adds to discoveries and inventions advancing in general the field.
These members, because they are part of an academy,
can you admit, Francis?
They are productive. So they have publications, they have innovations, they have inventions, patents, and they have,
Gisela, can you admit, Francis?
So these are the people who can convince government, invest more in science and technology. And that was really the gist of our paper, our position paper in 2000. And it is Ernie Pernia who said that R&D by nature is expensive and it is a public good. So it is important for the government to take the lead in investing in R&D.
To increase the economic growth potential of the country, we cannot continue to just rely on traditional inputs into production as capital and labor. We also need to develop our expertise in science and technology and innovation so that we can come up with new systems, new ways of doing things.
I think that science, researchers, industry, and even the government is really like an ecosystem of knowledge. So I think it doesn't really matter if you're coming from a private institution or a public institution, such as a state university. I think we all have a role to play to improve the research capabilities and scientific knowledge here in the country. I think it is about time for us to realize that one of our roles as academics, as researchers, as scientists, is to actually contribute to that global body of knowledge.
And the role of this cooperation among these government agencies really is to be able to attract science and technology, global-based companies to set up shop here. And that is really key in terms of developing the science and technology innovation ecosystem in the country.
Particularly because there's that deep desire. And what PAASE does and can do more of is to promote this relationship between its members.
We really need to ratchet up the appreciation, the recognition of the importance of science and technology and innovation.
And we are all trying to attain what we call the common good, the greater, higher, long-term good of the Filipino people. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to 40th APAMS, the 40th Anniversary Annual Scientific Meeting and Symposium of PAASE, or the Philippine American Academy of Science and Engineering. I'm Gisela Concepcion, 2020 PAASE President and the host of this opening plenary session. As we commemorate the 40th foundation year of PAASE in the period of the global COVID-19 pandemic, we are confronted with serious challenges and unique opportunities. With the rest of the scientific community, we are called upon to contribute to understanding the evolving situation of COVID-19 from the scientific standpoint as basis for finding ways to stem its devastating impacts. And therefore, we aptly begin this conference with an opening plenary session today on the subject of COVID-19. Thank you for joining us. Stay with us through the rest of the month-long conference with the theme, Outreach to Philippine Regions. 40th APAMS is unprecedented. It runs for 4 weeks every day, Mondays to Fridays, starting at 8 a.m. Philippine time, from today, July 20 until August 14. It features 6 plenary sessions, 30 parallel sessions, 4 poster sessions totaling more than 200 presentations, and 8 group discussions on science advocacies. As you will note in the scientific program, 40th APAMS, okay, you see us now. 40th APAMS showcases the science-based endeavors pursued not only by PAASE members, but also by champions and practitioners of science from other sectors in urban and rural areas of the country who could become PAASE's partners. 40th APAMS is unique. The host of each parallel session planned his own session and invited special speakers in his area of research. Each parallel session is as important as each plenary session. Our group discussion leaders are formulating key discussion points and a framework to share with participants during the discussions. Okay, can I ask everyone to mute their microphones, please? With a rich repertoire of presentations and discussions, 40th APAMS provides the unique opportunity to bring us together to jumpstart the conversations on science-based problem solving and productivity in the country. We note that a tagline of PAASE is, Agham at Kaalaman para sa Bayan. Registration in 40th APAMS is free, and you need only to click the Zoom link of each plenary or parallel session or group discussion to register. One thing I think each of us has learned from COVID-19 is the value of parsimony. The virus, so intelligent, so efficient, possesses so little, yet does so much. We ourselves now learn to retain mostly the barest essentials and shed the superfluous peripherals. We are maximizing our interactions on air, liberated from time and space, able to focus on the substance of our messages, able to communicate them clearly with the aid of pre-recordings and with slides that can be easily read from our desktops. We are becoming more efficient at little or no cost, except for the cost of our commitment, our talent, and effort. So let us make the most of 40th APAMS. We are deeply grateful to many PAASE members and friends who are making the entire month-long celebration possible. In closing, let me say, this is the best of times, in the worst of times, to celebrate 40 years of science and engineering practiced by generations of PAASE members. We thank PAASE's founders and honor them by keeping PAASE growing and vibrant. In particular, we would like to thank all our speakers who will share their knowledge with us in this conference. We hope to shine a light for science to lead us out of the darkness of the current crisis. Let us hope that in this long, arduous struggle, we can celebrate our victories and endure and learn from our failures. Thank you. Let me now turn over control to Dr. Serafica, who will lead the panel discussion of PAASE members who are newly elected to the National Academy of Science and Technology, or NAST, on the subject of COVID-19. Al?
Thank you, Gisela. Thanks. That was a very nice welcome. Hello, fellow PAASE members. Hope everyone's doing well and healthy. And we're looking forward to seeing you in person soon. But for now, we'll have to stick with this format. Today, we've asked 5 of our members, including me, to briefly just describe what we've been doing related to COVID-19 in this time of lockdown in the Philippines and in the United States. But I think we only have one representative from North Carolina, that's Francis. So that the intent was really just to describe what one person can do to help in our effort to fight the virus and the pandemic. And I think after each of one has a time to kind of present and describe what they've been doing, I ask everyone also to come up with a wish list in terms of what we would want to do moving forward. So I think with that introduction, we're gonna have Anne Villalobos first, ladies first, to go ahead and describe her efforts. Then it's gonna be Windell, and then Francis, Chris, and then me. So take it away, Anne.
Okay, my slides. What happened to my slides?
Richmond, can you load the slides, please?
Are you trying to share from your computer, or?
I think Richmond's supposed to start the sharing. Yeah.
That?
Yeah, I think she's loading it. There you go.
Good morning or good evening. There are 2 basic ways to develop vaccines against COVID. The first one is by the traditional method, that's the live attenuated virus, or the inactivated virus. And then there's the second one, which is more advanced and novel. That's based on biotechnology, where you have the nucleic acid based, either DNA based or RNA based. And then the viral vector vaccines, wherein you have replicating or non-replicating expression vector, and then virus-like particle, and then subunit of SARS-CoV-2. Now for this, there's a total of 185 vaccine candidates that's being studied right now. And for therapeutics, it could be the antibodies like the cocktail of neutralizing antibodies that Regeneron is developing, and obviously the antivirals like remdesivir, cell-based devices, or repurposed drugs like dexamethasone and hydroxychloroquine. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. Now for vaccines, it is so impressive that the world has joined together to develop vaccines against COVID. And with the cooperation from private, government, NGOs, vaccines have been developed. And this time it's something unique because it's developed by the new scale and new speed. New scale in a way that millions of doses are manufactured per day in order to meet the clinical needs. And the hurdles there are, you have to manufacture also millions of vials and syringes, and where the contract companies take place also. That's the contract bulk manufacturing that's needed. New speed in a way that for the uniqueness of COVID, that means that the vaccine development has to speed up. That means that the sponsors who develop the vaccines review their data, interpret them within themselves, that's internally, and then consult with regulatory bodies, and they have to make the decisions forward at their own risk. So because of that, the COVID-19 vaccine development is only for 12 from molecule to market. Now, when you compare that with the industry normal development, that's 10 to 18 years. So that's very impressive right now. So there's a lot of opportunity for the sponsors. Next slide, please. Now with this, I have here the front runners for vaccines and therapeutics against SARS-CoV-2 or against COVID-19. And by the end of the year and early next year, approximately 3 to 4 vaccines will be available either by emergency use authorization or in the market of some cases. But the question is, will it become normal when vaccines are available? Now we have to address this, the problem with mass allocation and distribution. What's the capacity and the manufacture of these vaccines, and can they supply the whole world at once? And that means that there are vaccinated and non-vaccinated population, which is also dangerous. And the other concern is, do these vaccines have long-lasting immunity or just a year like the flu vaccine? And will they be effective in older populations? Because usually it's effective right away for younger population, but the older population may not be that effective. So that means that the new normal that we will have, even with the vaccines, we still have to have strict compliance in terms of still wearing our face mask, social distancing, and hygiene. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. That was really a very nice and concise description on where we are on vaccines and development. Clearly, we're compressing time and space right now with our efforts in the scientific community to come up with a solution towards our common enemy. And those questions really are very relevant and difficult to answer at this point. And I think we'll just have to cross the bridge when we get there. For the next speaker, it would be Windell from UP, and he will be describing his efforts in the detection and diagnosis or his for COVID-19. Windell?
Yeah, thank you very much, Al. Good morning, everyone. I'll be discussing about salivary diagnostics for COVID-19. Take note that this is a prospective study. Okay, as we all know today, rapid and accurate diagnosis of COVID-19 is crucial in controlling the outbreak in the community and, of course, in the hospitals. Currently, nasopharyngeal and oropharyngeal swabs are the recommended specimen types for the RT-PCR detection of SARS-CoV-2. The collection of these specimen types, of course, would require close contact between the healthcare workers and patients, and would pose a risk of transmission of the virus. It would also cause discomfort and may also cause bleeding, especially if the patient is suffering from thrombocytopenia. Now, these collection systems can also induce coughing and sneezing, generating aerosol, which can obviously transmit the virus. Hence, nasopharyngeal and oropharyngeal swabs may not be desirable for sequential monitoring of viral load. On the other hand, of course, we know that blood is the specimen of choice for antibody detection. Well, we also know that COVID-19 is associated with human-to-human transmission, and SARS-CoV-2 was recently detected in the saliva of infected patients. Saliva does have a significant role in the human-to-human transmission. Hence, salivary diagnostics may provide an easy and cost-effective point-of-care platform for quick and early diagnosis of COVID-19. Saliva is secreted from the human salivary glands, which contains minerals. You have their electrolytes, buffers, enzymes, enzyme inhibitors. You have growth factors, cytokines, also immunoglobulins. In particular, you can see their secretory IgA, mucins, and also glycoproteins. Now, interestingly, the saliva that is harvested from the space between the teeth and the gums is enriched with gingival crevicular fluid, or GCF. Now, the composition of GCF resembles that of serum and is enriched with antibodies. So you have there your IgG, IgM, and also your IgA. Okay, saliva has been studied thoroughly as a potential diagnostic tool, and it is expected to become a substitute for other biological fluids, such as serum, in disease diagnosis. So saliva can be used for the direct detection of the SARS-CoV-2 virus and the quantification of the specific immunoglobulins produced by it. Now, saliva specimens, as you know, can easily be obtained easily, as the patient can actually be asked to spit into a sterile container. But of course, if you would like to do this in our own setting here in the Philippines, we have to standardize the sample collection. Now, the collection of saliva is non-invasive and greatly minimizes the exposure of healthcare workers to COVID-19. Now, according to studies, saliva has a high consistency rate of greater than 90%, with nasopharyngeal specimens in the detection of respiratory viruses, including coronaviruses. Now, what are some of the advantages of using saliva for diagnosis? Well, of course, it is safer to administer than serum sampling because there's no need for use of needles. There's also no need for trained medical staff. Multiple samples can actually be obtained easily. Collection and screening can also be done at home. It minimizes the risk of cross-contamination. It requires lesser manipulation during diagnostic procedures compared to serum. And saliva does not clot and can be manipulated easily than blood. Next slide, please. Our next slide.
Which one? Please move that there.
Okay, so SARS-CoV-2 can be detected in saliva, as I mentioned, at high titers. So salivary diagnostics is a dynamic field that is being incorporated as part of disease diagnosis, clinical monitoring of systemic health, and to make significant clinical decisions for patient care. Now, I mentioned earlier about GCF and the presence of IgM, IgG, and IgA in serum against components of the virus, such as nucleoprotein. And you also have the action of antibodies against spike protein, in particular the receptor binding domain. It has been described in COVID-19, especially for those patients about 10 days or later after symptom onset, and they were able to clearly see this from the serum. Now, presence of these immunoglobulins detected in saliva correlated well with antibodies in serum, showing high sensitivity and also specificity. So salivary antibodies to source SARS-CoV-2 could serve as a non-invasive alternative to serological testing for widespread monitoring of SARS-CoV-2 infection throughout the population. So if saliva can support measurements of both the disease, the presence of the SARS-CoV-2 RNA virus, as well as antibodies against the SARS-CoV-2, this sample type could provide an important opportunity to monitor individual and population level SARS-CoV-2 transmission, infection, and immunity dynamics over place and time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wendell. I've been very excited about actually the saliva detection capability. I've heard of an emergency use authorization in the FDA as early as April 15. In Rutgers University, a professor there has been doing some tests, and we contacted him. He was doing about 10,000 tests a day, and I can't wait to have access to that data to guide us where we need to go from here. I think I remember Dr. Asuncion as well mentioned a group here in the Philippines. Of course, for our fellow members, Wendell has been able to develop a lamp saliva-based detection for dengue, and that's where his interest of extending that capability to COVID-19 has emanated from. So I think we're going to move on from the detection and the vaccines to environmental monitoring. So we would like to, Richmond, if you can load the Francis de los Reyes slide, please. And Francis, I think you're all set to move forward once your slide is up. Richmond.
Okay, well, good morning. Thank you, Richmond. Thank you, Al, for the introduction. So I have been working in water and wastewater as an environmental engineer and microbiologist. And as early as March, yeah, actually, Richmond, if you can stay on presentation mode. As early as March, we were talking about how we can possibly detect SARS-CoV-2 in the environment. And in April, we were able to submit and get funding from the National Science Foundation in the US on SARS-CoV-2 in water. So this first slide actually summarizes the current knowledge that we have in terms of SARS-CoV-2. So the first point is that the virus is easily inactivated in the environment, in water, and on surfaces. And that's why it's easy to kill the virus. It's an enveloped virus that is actually easier to inactivate with surfactants or disinfectants like chlorine. And your water treatment process and your wastewater treatment processes should be able to inactivate the virus. The virus can survive for a few days in untreated wastewater and sewage, and therefore it is a concern. However, as I'll discuss later, the risks are very low. We do know that the virus is shed in human fecal material, in human feces, by people who are symptomatic, asymptomatic, even pre-symptomatic, and obviously infected COVID-19 patients. And what that means is that the virus actually goes through the stomach and through fecal matter and enters into sewage or wastewater. However, there's really no evidence of the infectious virus surviving in wastewater or sewage. So even though we can detect the virus, or at least the signals of the virus, there's really no evidence that it is infective. And to date, nobody has found or nobody has isolated infectious viral particles from wastewater or sewage. And to date, there is no evidence of what we call fecal oral transmission. So most of the diseases that we think about when it comes to exposure to sewage or wastewater infect people through a fecal oral pathway. And apparently for SARS-CoV-2, we still have zero evidence that this happens this way. So the bottom line is that you are safe to drink your water. You will not get infected with SARS-CoV-2 with drinking water if that water has been properly treated and disinfected with chlorine, for example. In terms of natural waters, a lot of people are trying to figure out if the virus is present in all kinds of natural waters. And so far, the prevailing knowledge is that it may be there for a few days. We can detect the RNA of the virus, but for the most part, the risks of, again, being infected are very low, unless, of course, that you have water that is directly being impacted by sewage. What about toilets and aerosolization? In other words, when you flush your toilet, do you get the spray or bioaerosols coming out of the toilet because of the flushing action? And the answer there is the risk is minimal. The number of droplets and bioaerosols that you will get from flushing your toilet, that number is actually quite small. And if you multiply that by the probability that the viruses are going to be in that aerosol, it becomes negligible. Having said that, if you have an active COVID-19 patient in your household, the guidance is that if possible, they should use a separate toilet, and there should be plenty of sanitation in terms of sanitizing surfaces. And also, if you can have a cover on your toilet before you flush, that would be good. The bottom line is that with proper hygiene, hand washing, and cleaning of surfaces, SARS-CoV-2 should be rapidly disinfected. Now, the idea that the virus is shed in human fecal material then raises the point of monitoring for the virus in wastewater. So this is called wastewater-based epidemiology. Next slide, please. Okay. So yeah, you can stay in presentation mode. Okay. So this wastewater-based epidemiology or surveillance is the idea that what you actually have in wastewater is a pooled sample. So instead of sampling each individual, you're actually sampling a whole community if they are contributing water to a sanitary sewer or to a series of community level type of wastewater. So this is what we've been doing since April in North Carolina and also in other cities with partners in Houston, in Washington, D.C., and in California. The idea that even infected people, even pre-symptomatic, symptomatic people, and even asymptomatic people, those who don't basically show any symptoms but have the virus in them, actually contribute to the wastewater. So if you're sampling a facility that takes in the wastewater from, let's say, 100,000 people, effectively with one sample, you're sampling 100,000 people. And if you do that, and you can also sample, for example, hospitals or prisons or nursing homes or other hotspots, if you do that, you are actually saving a lot of time and money because you are saying something about the community level infection. So there have been several studies on this, and one study basically said that wastewater-based surveillance would basically save a lot of money, and the reagents themselves would cost 0.014% of testing those same number of individuals. In terms of testing, I have to note that the testing is right now mostly detecting the RNA of the virus. And again, this doesn't mean anything about the infection of the virus, just the presence of the RNA. And there are two methods that are being applied right now all around the world. One of them is reverse transcription followed by quantitative PCR. And the other one is digital droplet PCR. So my group has been doing digital droplet PCR, and we have been collecting samples since April until today. So the advantages are, next slide, please. If you are going to do this, that you could actually have different ways of using the data. For example, you can track trends. You can detect if in a community you are actually getting better in terms of the infection or you're being hit with the second wave. So a lot of papers, there's probably maybe 10 to 12 papers that are published right now, say that you can actually detect the SARS-CoV-2 RNA in wastewater before you actually have the very first cases in patients. So we can track the trends, and we can actually predict what's going to happen in terms of if the community infection rate is going up or going down. We can also estimate the infection prevalence in the community. and compare that with clinical estimates. This is a little bit tricky. There's a lot of data and a lot of assumptions that go into this, but a lot of people are working on how to actually do this estimation using models. We can look at viral evolution. In other words, what's happening to the viral genome? Do we have different strains in different geographic areas? And that will tell us how the virus has evolved over time. And there's evidence right now that actually it has evolved. There seems to be no changes in terms of how severe the virus can affect you, but it has changed. And then finally, you can do this wastewater-based surveillance to identify hotspots or areas that are have a higher prevalence, higher infection rate, and therefore you can target public health interventions in those areas. So we're continuing this work, and we are actually helping out. I'm helping out a group at the UP Diliman start up their research in terms of looking at water bodies, steros in Manila, and also some water samples in Davao and wastewater influent to do the same things in the Philippines. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer questions later.
Thank you, Francis. This is one of those examples of the two bridges that we've been showing you early on, where in this case, I guess it's coming from North Carolina all the way down to the Pasig or Esteros in Manila. Clearly, we'd be very interested, Francis, on your progress. And I know you've been working with Carol, a fellow Araula of UP Marine Science. So clearly, if we can, well, Ayala as Manila Water, hopefully we can, and Maynilad also can be part of the whole project, I guess. But this is one of those exact synergy that we've been looking for, that's only enabled by having such a conversation between our PAASE members in the US and our local members here. So now we'll move forward in terms of our presentation. Next on deck is Chris Monterola, and he will be talking about his side of data and more on the impact of COVID-19 and what he thinks we should be doing. Take it away, Chris.
Thank you so much, Al. Good morning, good evening to everyone. Good day. I will be sharing two perspectives, hopefully to stimulate our discussion, our forum for today. Perspective one, we all know that the three main components that has been compromised because of COVID-19 is health, economy, and education. I would like to believe that this crisis, we just don't want to solve this problem, but it is possible for us to strive to create a better normal. And I'm a scientist in a business school, and we have the engagement that I have is essentially on looking. Mon, can I request that the other phones are muted? Okay. The contribution that we have is on essentially looking at data science in AI, in looking at what can happen beyond the current pandemic. So we have seen some of the reason why I'm very optimistic that there could be a better normal, that we can strive for a better normal as a result of this pandemic, is because we have seen that innovations have resulted to an acceleration in medical breakthroughs. So as Anna shared, a vaccine development that typically will take 10 to 18 years probably can now be done within 12 to 15 months. We also have seen innovation on mental health, mental depression problem, AI-enabled technology that has been unprecedentedly improved, okay, during this pandemic. Another reason why I can be very optimistic is that we have observed, and I think during this 1 month long PAASE meeting, we will hear a lot about this one, is the enhanced government agency, government academic industry collaborations. In the last 3 to 4 months, I have seen successes that I have not seen in the last 10 years, at least here in the Philippine setting. I guess some of our members, especially Al, in the next presentation, will mention some of these engagements. And third, we've been pushing for digital transformation of the different companies in the country. And there has been resistance. Okay, a good portion of the local-based companies, they are not in the industry 4.0 stage, but industry 2.0. But now, because of the current pandemic, there is a need for them to survive, to do digital transformation. And I will be happy to expound on this during the presentation on how we help these different companies to do digital transformation during this time of the pandemic. Lastly, next slide, Mon, please. Okay, lastly, this is the second perspective that I would like to share. I believe that we must approach the crisis due to COVID-19 with an entrepreneurial lens. Okay, the main reason why we've been seeing a lot of transmission currently is that people are not used to wearing masks and PPEs. These were designed for doctors. And in general, this is too uncomfortable, especially in the Philippine setting where it is hot and humid. But more importantly, in the hierarchy of needs, PPEs and masks are expensive. Okay, in the hierarchy of needs, you can look at food, you look at shelter, even entertainment. But for classes D and E in the Philippine economy, in the Philippine setting, buying masks is too expensive. And another thing that I believe are relatively expensive too is detergents. Okay, you need to wash your clothes once you go outside, and I think that is not the priority of our countrymen who are in the classes D and E. So we need some level of innovation for masks and PPEs. And second is innovation on tracing. Current procedure in the Philippine setting is both inefficient and inconvenient. If you go to Starbucks, you need to write your name, address, and telephone number. And the veracity of that information, it is not digitized, is of course compromised. And worse, one of the things that I realized there is that you will be sharing the same pen, okay, in going from one person to another person. Maybe this is the time where we can speed up on the idea of a national ID that is RF enabled. And that is one reason why I think the anti-terrorism bill is probably not a good timing at this point in time. And lastly, I would like to emphasize that this is not just a problem on health. Okay, this is also, of course, a problem on the economy. Maybe there is a possibility. That's why I would like to entice everyone to imagine this as, of course, anchored on science, but look at it with an entrepreneurial perspective. There is a lot of unspent money from classes A, B, from the rich people in this country that maybe we can use to stimulate the economy. Unspent money or excess money simply because right now they are buying just essentials. And as a result, there are money actually that is not spent. Most of the buying of the Philippines has been shown to be impulse buying, and now because of the current pandemic, this is not the case. The last one that I would like to emphasize is that at this point, I think mass testing is statistically not very useful now. The idea of testing 1 to 2% of the population, given the current extent of the pandemic, is probably statistically not useful in containing the pandemic. Our slim window of opportunity is over unless we can create an efficient and non-intrusive or non-invasive tracing procedure. And I will be happy to expound on the mathematics of this. I think our best chance is wasted because of three main blunders. One, we did not close our borders fast enough. Second, we allow those in the Metro Manila residents, the epicenter of the epidemic, to go to their home provinces when the epidemic is happening. And third, we have not done mass testing fast enough. I'm not sure if we have done all those three, we will be in a better situation right now because of the complexity of the Philippines landscape and the complexity of the problem. But right now, I think 1 to 2 million testing will not be sufficient to cover and actually prevent the virus from happening. Thank you. Thank you, Al.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. I agree wholeheartedly with your recommendation. Actually, it hits me and that last point there. But we'll talk about that in a separate discussion. But clearly, to me, this is a moving target that we're dealing with, and I agree that we cannot rest until we have addressed all those issues from PPEs to diagnostic to eventually vaccination. So my whole point when Giselle asked me to do this at the beginning of our meeting was really just to describe what it's like for us, scientists stuck in our homes, quarantined, and can't go anywhere. It's been 4 months, I haven't stepped outside. What is it that we can do? And as you probably can see, we can do a lot. And so when I reflected back early on, as early as March, when the news first came out that our local kit, this is Raul Destura's kit with UP NIH being assisted by PCHRD of DOST to develop it, was just about to start their validation studies. That's when I knew, oh boy, we need a stopgap measure in terms of being able to have early testing capability. It so happened that I was part of the ASEAN Diagnostic Hub, so I gave a call to our friends in Singapore at A-Star with Dr. Sidney Yee to lend us some of their testing kits that they already rolled out as early as February 1st. And we actually had earlier conversations with Ayala Health to help us facilitate the transfer at that time. On successfully to be received as early as April, and from the initial 400 kits that they are talking about, I think Temasek Holdings, which is their national funding group, end up donating 600,000 of these kits in the early phase of the pandemic. So clearly, see what one phone call can lead to discussions with everybody else in NIH and DOST, just being aware of what is available for us, indeed accelerated that. Another example of a government industry academe partnership is on the gene expert. We found out in our PAASE website exchanges, this is the value of the communications, guys. In as much as I know you find the emails to be overwhelming, if you don't like it, just cancel it. But there are bits and nuggets of information in our exchanges that precipitated to us knowing that there are gene expert machines, 60 of them, 66 of them available in country for TB testing, and that can be easily converted into testing COVID-19 if we can get the Cepheid cartridges from California that was being just rolled out as early as April. And we work together with PBSP, this is Philippine Business for Social Progress, because they were the ones who were able to have access to the gene expert machines as well as funding to procure the cartridges. And with the help of Secretary Pernia of NEDA, contacting our DFA, as well as our PBSP contacting the US Embassy for assistance and eventually getting to the Philippine Embassy in San Francisco. The whole process took a month, but in the end, we were able to order 180. And I think as of this date, Giselle can elaborate, there are 22 gene expert centers that are running, being able to conduct testing. Again, a demonstration of what government, industry, and academe can facilitate. I know Sean of UPLB was one of the early proponents into getting gene expert testing capability in Los Baños. And I heard 2 weeks ago that they opened their COVID-19 testing capability. In terms of medical device development and ventilator discussions, we had this as early as well as in March. And we were able to discuss with DOST and industry like IMI, Ayala, and Unilab Foundation about possibly being able to not only develop, but also manufacture and test. Also with PASU, the Association of State Universities, on PPE donations in the regions. This was also facilitated by Ronald and in Iloilo with San Agustin. So I just want you to open up our contacts, our Rolodex, and our connections to explore possible that connections develop in various areas, from detection to cure to even monitoring. And that's what we've been doing in the last 4 months that we are locked down. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to briefly come up with my wish list before I end the session. But moving forward, I think most of our friends are anxious to be able to go back to normal, but unfortunately, we won't get there anytime soon unless, as our earlier presenters have said, we need to have the vaccine, but even that has some questions, as Anne intimated. It's not going to be a silver bullet right away. Environmental monitoring will be critical, and saliva detection is very near and dear to my heart, and I wanted to support that, Windell. And after this meeting, we'll talk about how do we move forward with what we have and who can we contact. I've had some intimate discussions with a Japanese group, pharmaceutical, that has been implementing it in Japan. So clearly that's another area that we can explore. Definitely cures and local production, localization of PPEs, as Chris intimated, definitely is something that we should be doing. I've seen Banawe hand-woven face mask, and I've been wanting to get my hands on it so I can use it already. I bet you they'll be more comfortable coming from the north. And also definitely on the vaccine procurement and distribution and local production is also something that would need tremendous amount of capital, and this is where your AB, cash in the bank, or undeployed resources can be tapped, especially if we can demonstrate capability. And that's what I'm here for. I'm hoping that as a group and individually, we can demonstrate our capacity to be able to help in this fight. And in doing so, we can be beacons and shining example of what can be done. And eventually people will see and hopefully believe and contribute, open up their wallets in doing so. And as an initial, putting your money where your mouth is always a nice demonstration of commitment. And that's a very typical language we use in the venture capital community. And I am willing to put my money where my mouth is, as Chris has already asked us. And let's do that if we cannot do the other parts. But I'm sure as PAASE, with our collective mind power, if you want to call it, in science and technology, we can do a lot. Imagine there's only 5 of us in the last less than an hour describing to you what we have, and it's tremendous already. I hope that every one of us are feeling empowered and wanting to do something to be able to win this fight. And I think with that, I'm leaving another 10 minutes available for some of our viewers as well as co-members. If they have any burning questions that they wanted to ask, I'm willing to entertain a few before Gisela gets moving to introducing our government representative before, Secretary Pernia. And I hope that you found the first hour of our 40th anniversary meeting to be productive and informative. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Al. So we have 2 questions that you could address. One is from Des Hautea. What's the status of Cepheid Expert Express SARS-CoV-2? Could you give us more details? Second question is from Rodel Subade. What is the status of the kit developed by Dr. Raul Destura? Just those 2 quick questions.
Okay. That's very quick to answer. So far, Des, I think we do have in the DOH site 22 Cepheid centers that are been certified for testing. The first shipments of the Cepheid cartridges has been distributed to those centers. And in terms of the total volume, the order donated by Philippine Business for Social Progress is about 180,000 cartridges I'm not sure yet if they've actually used up all 180,000, but based on the reports on the center outputs, I don't think they've gotten to even 100,000 of those. So I would suspect that we're still have some stock available, but with the ramp up in testing, I will follow up where we are in terms of the CEPI delivery from US or Switzerland. So I hope. But there are 22 centers. Remember when we started this, Chris Monterola at AIM did the initial mapping for the centers to be enabled. And clearly that's when we found out that UPLB doesn't have a testing center close by. And that's what we lobbied to DOH to enable that, and that's been done. So I think I will follow up with PBSP in terms of the deliveries on the cartridges, but I'm happy to say that I think as far away as Zamboanga and Palawan are already testing. In terms of Raul Destura's team in UP, I've been informed as of today or yesterday that it is available and validated and ready to be utilized. UST USAID and has appealed to the scientific community to at least begin using whatever they have, if they have it available in their centers, as well as supporting it in requesting it in the various centers that they are going to. I know UP Manila, NIH, Cynthia Saloma, Eva Cochonco, and of course Chancellor Menchit Padilla are all rearing to get back to collecting the data as the tests move forward to increase our confidence in the utilization of our local. And I'm all for using our local kit, guys, because clearly this is not only the most cost-effective way, but also symbolizes our scientific effort in fighting this disease. And congratulations again to Raul and the local COVID-19 kit team for getting this up and running again and very quickly. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Al. There's a question for Francis. It's posted. Francis, would you like to reply to the question of Dr. Irineo Lit?
Right. So the question is, there are a lot of households in the urban poor and other human settlements that don't have proper toilets. And so fecal material may still be improperly disposed. So are there any studies on how long this coronavirus remains potent in feces? And I think the questioner, Irineo Lit, is asking because he's an entomologist and there is no evidence of SARS-CoV-2 being transmitted by filth flies, house flies, and blowflies, but there's also no evidence that the insects, might not. So let's just be clear about what we know in terms of SARS-CoV-2. So we know it's shed in feces because we can detect the RNA of the virus. To date, we still don't have definitive evidence. There has really been no peer-reviewed study that showed that they have isolated the infectious virus. So what we're detecting is the RNA that tells us that the virus was there, but that RNA, whether or not that's from an infectious virus particle or whether that is actually just, degraded virus remnants, it's just the RNA that's persisting in the feces. We don't know. So nobody has yet isolated infectious virus from feces. So that's the first thing. So that pretty much tells us that even though people are trying, so I know of some researchers, this is what they do. What we know about the fate of SARS-CoV-2 in water are based on experiments where we actually put the virus in water and then we see how long they stay there. And that's where we say it's there for a few days. It will survive depending on temperature, depending on a lot of different factors. But we also know that they are easily disinfected. So soap will also basically destroy this envelope virus. So there is no evidence that we have infectious virus in feces and wastewater, and therefore the other pathways like insects, for example, there's still a lot of research that needs to be done, but there doesn't seem to be any evidence of that at the moment. A lot of this is fast changing. The very first papers came out in March, and in a few months we're learning a lot, but we still don't know a lot. So thanks for the question.
Okay, thank you, Francis. Thanks to all our panelists, and Windell, Francis, and Chris, who discussed critical issues and measures to curb COVID-19, and to Al, who underscored the need for academia, government, and the private sector to collaborate in order to deal with COVID-19 effectively. Okay, so we're still admitting some people in, so please bear with us. So, if the audience has more questions for the panel, kindly send them through the chat box. And after the talks are completed, if time permits, we will have more Q&A. We now move to the next part of our program. At this point, I am happy and honored to introduce our keynote speaker. Ernesto M. Pernia is former Secretary of Socio-Economic Planning, National Economic and Development Authority, Philippines. He has been Professor Emeritus of Economics, University of the Philippines, since 2013, having been on the faculty of the UP School of Economics for several years. Earlier, Dr. Pernia was lead economist at the Asian Development Bank. His work experience included investment climate and productivity, economic growth and poverty reduction, education and health, population and development, and regional economic cooperation in Asia. He was also regional advisor on population employment policy for Asia and the Pacific with the International Labor Organization. Dr. Pernia has served as chair of the Board of Trustees of the University of San Carlos and as a director on the board of the Philippine American Academy of Science and Engineering, or PAASE. He is also on the boards of NGOs involved in health, population, development concerns, and he is a former president of the Philippine Economic Society. Dr. Pernia obtained his PhD degree from the University of California, Berkeley on a Ford Foundation scholarship and Smithsonian Institution dissertation grant. He received the first award as Outstanding Young Scientist in Economics and Social Sciences from the National Academy of Science and Technology. He was chosen by the PAASE for the 2015 Co-Science Lectureship Award and inducted into the PAASE Hall of Honor in April 2018. Dr. Pernia has authored several books and articles in national and international journals. He's a very, very high IH index. He was an occasional contributor of public interest commentaries in various Philippine and some international dailies. Dr. Pernia was the principal author, architect, conceptualizer of the Philippine Development Plan 2016 to 2022 and the Philippine Medium-Term Plan, Ambition 2040, also of the COVID-19 Economic Recovery Plan of the country, which he charted before he resigned as NEDA Secretary on April 23, 2020. Please welcome Dr. Ernesto M. Pernia, whose talk is entitled Overcoming the Perfect Crisis Brought About by COVID-19. Dr. Pernia.
Oh, thank you, President of PAASE, Gisela Concepcion, for the introduction. Let me start with salutations. My heartiest and warmest greetings to the President of PAASE, Dr. Gisela Padilla Concepcion, high-spirited, energetic, whose energy runneth over. And of course, to the officers of PAASE, the board directors, and members of PAASE, and our distinguished guests in this annual meeting of PAASE and symposium. Thank you to the organizers of this APAMS PAASE 40th anniversary for giving me the singular honor of doing the keynote remarks. A popular saying was that life begins at 40. It's not being used anymore now because, but in the earlier generations, that was a popular phraseology. So perhaps this year marks PAASE's second life. The beginning of PAASE's truly pivotal, game-changing, and even life-changing and more palpable impact on the country's economy and society, underscored by our scientists and engineers' output, discoveries, and inventions that matter even more. Moreover, PAASE's 40th is a significant milestone, a watershed moment, perhaps for the start of a transition from this COVID pandemic to hopefully a new and better normal, as already mentioned by some of our earlier speakers like Chris Monterola. Let me, well, it feels rather strange that about this time last year, many of us in the dismal science, also known as economics, were taken by what was referred to then as the new globalization. The idea was globalization, as we knew it and were accustomed to, was undergoing radical transformation, its main features besieged by increasing protectionism or neo-nationalism, not to mention trade wars between the largest economies of the world, and the diverging growth trajectories of emerging economies. Added to this is the acceleration of digital integration. These hurdles to the global economic relations spurred inventive ways of connecting for trade and investment purposes, which nations and firms must figure out and imbibe to be in step with the new global, for this upcoming new global game. Thus, the Philippine Institute for Development Studies picked Navigating the New Globalization, Local Actions for Global Challenges as the theme of its 5th Annual Public Policy Conference, held last September 2019. A very challenging subject indeed, as many observers had characterized the new globalization by descriptions like volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, VUCA. Little did we know, and unbeknownst to all and sundry, that our concern about the so-called new globalization was just a foreboding of the upcoming perfect crisis, what we have now, much more devastating than the profound structural change in economic globalization. For what can be more volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous than the coronavirus or COVID-19 pandemic? Health and economy are intimately interactive, such that trying to get an optimal balance, an optimal trade-off of the extent and timing of interventions to each of these concerns has been a daunting challenge, to say the least.
Next slide, please.
So let me now go on to my PowerPoint. So I call it perfect crisis because it's a double-edged sword. Health and economy, which, as I've said earlier, is intimately interactive. Poor health adversely affects economic productivity, and bad economy hurts health through livelihoods and incomes. There's no choice for us but to protect both. So it's a question of priority of nature or priority of order in terms of interventions. In this coronavirus pandemic, health is given priority, but attention to the economy cannot lag too far behind. And I think that is the problem we're encountering now. To what extent can we continue the lockdown, the quarantine, making it more hard or loosening it up so that the economy can begin to breathe and be back on track. Next slide. Next slide. So let me start with socioeconomic indicators. So I call these indicators the good and the bad.
Next slide, please.
Next slide, please. The real economic growth in between 2016 and 2019 averaged 6.6%, a rather outstanding performance in the country's contemporary economic history. And we were just lagging behind a little bit behind Vietnam, which has been the fastest growing ASEAN economy. In fact, the Philippine economy was poised to become an upper middle income country this year, 2020, if not for the outbreak of COVID-19. Headline inflation averaged only 3% between 2016 and 2019 versus our target range of 2 to 4% inflation rate. We had the lowest unemployment rate ever recorded in history, in the recent economic history of the country, at 5.3%, and underemployment at 14.8% achieved in January 2020. That was the last. That was the latest labor force survey before the crisis, the COVID pandemic crisis outbreak. We also achieved the lowest poverty incidence in 2018 at 16.6%, down from 23.3% in 2015, meaning that about 6 million Filipinos were lifted out of poverty. Next slide, please. Fiscal space, meaning our fiscal situation was at its best also. We had the highest revenue collection at more than 16%, and lowest debt to GDP ratio of 39.6%, compared to our worst debt to GDP ratio of about 75% in 2004-2005. We also got the highest ever credit rating by credit rating agencies like Moody's, S&P, Fitch ratings, and also the Japanese rating agency that ranges between BBB+ to A-, which is among the shining achievements compared with other ASEAN countries. Then our infrastructure, massive infrastructure program spending, we called it Build, BBB, doubled to 4.5% relative to GDP, it doubled compared to the past 5 years and even earlier. So In other words, the government was really hell-bent on improving our creaky, our dilapidated infrastructure in the country. Next slide, please. But in the first quarter of 2020, our growth rate plummeted to negative 0.2% due to the Taal volcano eruption, followed by the COVID coronavirus outbreak. The second quarter growth rate, which will be made available by the first week of August, that's next month, is likely to be much deeper negative before possibly improving slowly in the second half of 2020. Full year growth rate in 2020 is expected to be between negative 3.5% and negative 6.5%. So it's this is going to be the first time we have this negative growth rate in the past 22 years. Next slide, please. Factory output or industrial production sharply contracted by negative 40% in May 2020 due to the enhanced community quarantine, and that's because the ECQ was imposed on the whole of Luzon, including Metro Manila, which accounts for 75% of the country's GDP, and also anemic global trade. Underemployment, merchandise exports also declined by negative 36% in May 2020 due to slump in global trade. And merchandise imports shrunk as well to negative 41% in May 2020 due to global supply chain disruptions. Next slide. And there was something. Anyway, the unemployment, because of the shrinking of the GDP in the first quarter, unemployment has hit 17.7%, equivalent to about between 7 and 8 million unemployed workers. So that's why I call this set of numbers regarding the economy really bad. After the story we had for the averages between 2016 and 2019. So let's move on to the next slide. So this anticipatory and forward planning, AFP, this is not Armed Forces of the Philippines, anticipatory and forward planning. This was officially approved, next slide, officially approved by the Interagency Task Force on COVID-19 in May 27, 2020, as proposed by NEDA to prepare for economic recovery and transition to possibly a new normal. And one of the main developments after this was the Bayanihan 1, to heal as one. And we also needed to plan how to transition from Bayanihan to heal as one to Bayanihan to recover better as one. This Bayanihan, as you already know, essentially provided the social amelioration program as assistance to low-income households. Next slide. But there were positive externalities to the Bayanihan. You know, bayanihan is a very meaningful word. It's really a very rich Tagalog word, which I have not been used to because I am from the Visayas. But bayanihan means a lot of things. It's empathy, selflessness, generosity, magnanimity, compassionate. So this word is really something that should guide all of us, especially our leaders in the government, in the public sector, and in the private sector. If we can only live by and work by this very beautiful word, bayanihan, I think we can easily overcome our problems, this COVID crisis, maybe faster. So what happened because of this bayanihan and because of the crisis was what economists call positive externalities. So elements of malasakit or solidarity came together with the private sector and civil society organizations, spontaneous magnanimity. Project Ugnayan Damayan. This was a collective effort of Caritas Manila, which is the church group, business, and civil society, responded in 48 hours to provide food and medical supplies. Funds and consumable goods and various health equipment and supplies, including quarantine facilities and testing centers, were made available. You know, we had a very low capacity for, taking care of COVID patients and also testing centers. And so these facilities were ramped up with the help of the private sector. So volunteerism of healthcare workers and other frontliners also became very visible during this crisis. Next slide. The above highlights a whole of society or so-called bayanihan spirit effort. The government obviously cannot possibly do it alone, despite whatever assertions and claims the government may be making. Better coordination between government and the private sector efforts are needed so that the whole impact of the combined effort is greater. So let us not let the lessons of a perfect crisis go to waste. And Chris Monterola mentioned earlier this collaboration between government, private sector, and the academe. This is something that's also been developing more visibly and palpably. Like, for example, UP has been providing guidance to the DOH, Department of Health, in terms of the data regarding COVID, the new COVID cases and deaths and recoveries. And UP, the group in UP has actually been very helpful. They have been very accurate in their forecasts and in their reporting, much better than what the DOH has done. Next slide. For the country's development or nation building effort, synergistic public-private partnerships are called for, from development planning to formulating and implementing programs and projects. You know, we really need a more harmonious relationship between the public sector or the government and the private sector, rather than being an adversarial relationship, which, for example, came out or became visible in this tragic case of ABS-CBN. But let me not let me not elaborate on that because everybody knows that already. So efficient, effective, and self-sustaining partnerships require higher trust between the public sector and the private sector. And also the citizenry vis-a-vis government and the business sector. You know, compared with other countries, like especially the Scandinavian countries, we have a very low, we are really a low trust society. And that is something we have to work on. We have to be more trusting of our fellow men, and the public sector and the private sector have to be more trusting of each other, so that, you know, there's better cooperation. And, you know, that's how a country progresses. If there is adversarial relationship, then we have a problem. Then we are stuck in, you know, in some debates, and the country just cannot move on. So, next slide. So the Bayanihan, this AFP, Thorough and Forward Planning. So the idea is to prepare from Bayanihan to heal as one to Bayanihan to recover as one. So there are three objectives of the AFP, anticipatory and forward planning. We need to build confidence in the country's health system capacity. All levels of health personnel, equipment and supplies, and social infrastructure, meaning hospitals, health centers, testing centers, and so on, in the near term, and enhancing further over time to better prepare for the next possible health crisis. We have badly underinvested in health infrastructure vis-a-vis our ASEAN neighbors, and taken for granted our healthcare personnel. Our healthcare personnel, medical doctors, nurses, they are really badly underpaid. And that is why they leave the country. So maybe if the government cannot afford to provide adequate compensation for healthcare personnel, if there is better partnership with the private sector, and I think mentioned also earlier, maybe the private sector can pitch in to improve the compensation of our healthcare personnel and prevent them from leaving the country. You know, the expression is health is wealth. We can also say the health is economy. There's a recent study by McKinsey which shows that investment in health of $1 could result in $2 to $4 multiplier effect on the economy. And that is because of fewer premature deaths. So the workforce is larger, higher labor productivity, lower absenteeism. Let me give you some numbers in terms of our spending on COVID-19. In terms of per capita spending, we are the lowest among the major ASEAN economies. We are only spending $195 US per person, compared with Vietnam spending $277 per person, Thailand $1,211, Malaysia $2,488 per person, Indonesia $237, that's the second lowest, and Singapore $16,331 US per person. In terms of relative to GDP, we are spending only 5.7% of GDP versus Vietnam's 10% spending on this COVID crisis relative to GDP. Thailand 16%, Malaysia 22%, Indonesia 6%, and Singapore 26%. So we have not only badly underinvested in our health system capacity, we continue to still spend we have been a laggard in terms of spending on this health pandemic that we are facing. And that's because there's some obsession about keeping our high credit rating. Actually, because of our higher credit rating among credit rating agencies in the world, we should be able to borrow at easier, at lower rates than normal, than average for countries that are not that do not have as high credit rating as the Philippines has. So that if I were to decide, I would spend more, and never mind if we get a downgrade in our credit rating. It's more important that we address this health crisis and economic crisis frontally, without further delay. So anyway, let's go back to this investment in health, which is very productive, which results in a very productive, very high multiplier on the economy. This slide, this graph here shows countries classified by level of income. So in the highest level of income, the multiplier is 3 times. In our case, maybe our type is the second from the left, the second cluster, and 2 times. The multiplier is twice, and for the lower income countries, 4 times, and for the lowest, about 2 times the multiplier of spending on health vis-a-vis the impact on the economy of those countries. Let's go to the next slide, please. So the next objective of AFP is to rebuild consumer and business confidence. This is a very important objective, because without consumers being confident to go out and spend and work, then the economy, the supply side, production cannot be stimulated. So it's really it has to be a demand stimulus. That is the Keynesian approach to the economy during the Great Depression. The Keynesian approach was as demand stimulus, not supply stimulus. So what we need to, in terms of making or raising consumer confidence and business confidence, we need to ramp up testing, contact tracing, isolation, treatment to alleviate fear and worry and anxiety among the general public, consumers and workers and entrepreneurs. Because according to SWS survey, recent survey, 87% of the population say they are seriously concerned about COVID-19 contagion. So we need to revive consumer confidence. It is a sine qua non, because without consumer confidence, 70% of GDP, which is because our economy is consumption driven, is not it's not working. It's not contributing to GDP. So of course, with weak consumer spending from joblessness, it would keep our business and employment down, and hence our economy in the doldrums. And that is what's happening. And that is what that is why I said earlier, let us spend more. Let us spend to the extent that Vietnam, for example, is spending. And you know that Vietnam, I'm sure you know, it's a very widely known story that Vietnam has no death, has no COVID death at all, and very few cases. And also Thailand. Thailand has only about 58 deaths compared with our 1,700, I think now, 1,700. And their cases are only about 2,300, Thailand. And ironically, Thailand was the first to contract, the first country where a person contracted the pandemic or the coronavirus coming from Wuhan, and yet they were able to address it very quickly. So that is the thing. So let's move on. So there are proposed bills in Congress: ARISE, CURES, and CREATE. Let me just say that ARISE is geared to micro, small, and medium enterprises and jobs to promote consumer spending. And so it's essentially designed as for short to medium term sectoral and structural interventions. CURES is an unemployment reduction stimulus, and it focuses on infrastructure for high multiplier effect on the economy. CREATE is more geared towards large corporations, and it's really more in terms of reducing the tax rates on large corporations. But it is really more for later, for the longer term. Next slide. Okay, and then, okay, rebuilding consumer confidence is very challenging as humanity crawls on the dark tunnel toward the end of the pandemic, which impacts the timeliness and efficacy of the economic stimulus, efficiency and effectiveness of lockdowns. I think you have seen the next slide. Maybe some of you have seen this. Next slide. Next one. Yeah, this one shows
next
that.
Next slide.
Yeah, on the lower quadrant to the left, that is low mobility, low recovery. And that is where the Philippines and Indonesia are. On the right-hand side, lower quadrant, it is low mobility, high recovery. On the upper right-hand corner, that is where Vietnam and Thailand are. High mobility, high recovery. And on the other side is high mobility, low recovery, and that is where Greece and Poland and Brazil are. So maybe we have overdone our lockdown. And what we really should have done more was the health interventions, this testing, tracing, contact tracing, isolation, and treatment, more than lockdowns. Lockdowns can lock down the economy and lock down society. Anyway, next slide. I think, okay. And then, of course, our third objective is to recommend policies and programs to adapt to the new normal. But the new normal is very uncertain, and it's the object of various speculations. So I'd rather go to the next slide. And next slide. The next slide is about there are positive ways of seeing COVID-19 crisis. As I've said, the bayanihan spirit should really be cultivated, and we hope it can be sustained and strengthened for future crises, which is needed to foster inclusivity and reduce inequality. I think if we have this bayanihan spirit really imbibed and part of our, it becomes second nature, then we should really be doing better as an economy and as a society. And then the critical importance of public-private partnerships, including the academe, as mentioned earlier, in addressing the problems and implementing PPP, physical and social infrastructure projects. This is something that the government has shunned, which was not my my view. So anyway, let's go to the next slide. Greater public cognizance of S&T and innovation.
Back.
And this is where...
Back, or not, you're not controlling.
Yeah. And this is where PAASE is called to action. I think that's why I said earlier that this is the time that PAASE can make game-changing, life-changing impact on the Philippine economy and society. For example, there has been an acceleration of our adaptation to Industry 4.0, as evidenced by the use of digital technology. Now it's more widely used. And finally, my point is we need a culture of urgency, a sense of urgency. Filipinos tend to be too tolerant, too patient, too forbearing. Compared with our ASEAN neighbors, they have a higher sense of urgency. And I'm writing a book now, which is titled Virtuous Impatience. And I hope to get that out soon. And it's about how our country should really move on to a higher urgency country. Okay, next slide. This is the last slide now. Postlude. And all I'm saying here is, the AFP, Anticipatory and Forward Planning, ties in well with the Philippine Development Plan 2017 to 2022, which the objective of the plan was to lay the foundation for inclusive growth, a high-trust society, and a globally competitive knowledge economy. Again, something that PAASE should contribute to, a globally competitive knowledge economy. And these are the main pillars: malasakit, pagbabago, patuloy na pagunlad, strengthening the social fabric or solidarity, inequality reducing, transformation, and enhancing the economy's growth potential. And we also have the sub-pillars down there. Next slide. So with continuity of purpose through succeeding generations, or administrations rather, it should lead us to achieve our long-term vision of Ambition Natin 2040. So with that, let me end and thank again the organizers, President Gisela, for inviting me to do the keynote. I hope I was able to key in something. Thank you very much, President Concepcion, and to everybody here, Francis de los Reyes, of course, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pernia, for your thought-provoking presentation on the socioeconomic upturns from 2016 to 2019, then to the sudden dismal downturn in 2020, and then to a positive, anticipatory, and forward plan in response to crisis, rooted in individual virtues and the Filipino community values of bayanihan, on the creation of synergistic, trustful, private-public partnerships, and a major investment in securing a healthy, productive workforce. We are noting your call to action to PAASE, virtuous impatience, which I try to practice. We are deeply grateful to you, Dr. Pernia, for your outstanding service in government. Let us all give Dr. Pernia a virtual, rousing round of applause. Now, let us hear about measures being undertaken to protect a workforce from COVID-19 from a leader in the private business sector. I'm happy to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Paolo Maximo F. Borromeo, who has been a managing director since January 2016 and a member of the Ayala Corporation Management Committee and the Ayala Group Management Committee since September 2014. He
He has served as Group Head of Corporate Strategy and Development of the company since September 2014. In his role, he oversees the overall corporate planning process, portfolio strategy, group-wide innovation projects, data and analytics, digital initiatives, new business development, and special projects of the Ayala Group. In addition, Mr. Borromeo leads Ayala Corporation's healthcare businesses. He is currently the President and Chief Executive Officer of Ayala Healthcare Holdings Incorporated, ZapFam Incorporated Family Doc, and Healthway Philippines Incorporated, the Chairman of IE Medica and MedEthics, and the Vice Chairman of the Generica Group of Companies. He also sits on the board of other Ayala companies, including AC Energy International, AC Industrial Technology Holdings Incorporated, AC Ventures Holding Corporation, HCX Technology Partners Incorporated, and Ayala International Holdings Limited. Prior to joining Ayala, Mr. Borromeo was a principal at Booz & Company, a global strategy consulting firm based in San Francisco, California, USA. He obtained his Bachelor of Science degree in Management Engineering from the Ateneo de Manila University and his Master's in Business Administration with honors from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. Please welcome Mr. Paolo Maximo F. Borromeo, whose talk is entitled Corporate Best Practices in a COVID World. Paolo?
Hi, good morning, Dr. Concepcion, and thank you for having me here today. I hope you can all hear me okay?
Yes.
Very good. And good morning to all our colleagues at PAASE, and happy 40th anniversary, ma'am, and to all your members. Congratulations and happy 40th anniversary. I'd also want to say a special hello to Secretary Ernie Pernia. It's a pleasure, sir, to see you again. And I'm glad that Secretary ended, or one of his main themes was how private sector, how more investment be driven into healthcare, and that's certainly a theme that we prescribe to at the Ayala Group. So maraming salamat po, Secretary Pernia, and I think this will segue neatly into the messages that Secretary Pernia mentioned. Let me start off, maybe the first slide, please. Let me start off by saying that at the Ayala Group, as Dr. Gisela said, I look over the entire portfolio as well. We invest in industries that are critical to nation building. So we are very selective about our investment program and where we decide to put capital to work. And of late, where we've been putting that capital to work is really in
Ayala Group, BPI, Manila Water, BPI. Yung speaker ngayon, yung taga Ayala Health.
Thank you, sir. And so,
IMI, Energy.
Sorry, I just hear a little bit of mute, a little bit of feedback, Dora. Okay. So over the last few years, we've invested in infrastructure-related sectors, including the energy sector, the manufacturing sector, as well as the transportation sector. But what we're very proud of is our decision to invest in what we call social infrastructure, which is both education and healthcare. Ang healthcare po, that's our newest business and something that we're very proud of. If you go to the next page, please. It's something that stems all the way po to our principals. So Jaza himself has committed to supporting the healthcare sector, and really along the lines of what Secretary Pernia mentioned, that it's an industry, it's a sector that even before COVID needed massive support. And obviously this has become more apparent and more obvious with COVID. And kami po, patuloy lang po ang investment namin sa sektor ng healthcare. In the space, we've created a small portfolio of businesses. Next page, please. Sorry, but just to say that our vision for healthcare is one that is really synergistic and integrated in terms of an ecosystem. Our view is we'd like to bring more affordable healthcare to more Filipinos and touch at least 1 out of every 5 Filipinos by 2030 using the many investments that we've made. No? Next page, please. Thank you. So just to give, I guess, the audience a little more color in terms of what we've done in healthcare over the last few years, we've invested in 4 subsectors, so to speak. No? The first one is in the pharmaceutical subsector, and our thesis here is to bring more quality, affordable medicines to more Filipinos, and hence we invested heavily in the Generica drugstore, which we've expanded to 800 stores today. And we also started investing in our own pharmaceutical importation and distribution to be able to bring in medicine to more Filipinos, hopefully in a more affordable manner. The second pillar that we invested in is our clinical network, and I'll talk more about this later. But we're proud to say that we have the largest network of primary care clinics and specialty clinics, and it's been put to good use during the crisis. The third pillar that we're investing in is in specialty and multi-specialty hospitals. Proud to say that we're still investing and building a new hospital. It's the Ayala Cancer Hospital, the first dedicated cancer-focused center in the Philippines. And also, of course, we have a partnership with Qualimed, which is a chain of multi-specialty hospitals around the Philippines. And then finally, our fourth pillar is in the field of digital health, where we started enabling entrepreneurs and other like-minded founders to put up these startup companies. No? So for instance, we invested in MedGrocer, which is an online medicine platform. We also invested in Aid, which is a home health service app. It's almost like a Grab or an Uber for medical practitioners to be delivered to your home. And of course, we have our own initiatives. We built our own electronic medical platform called Vigos, which we now deploy to all of our clinics. So just to give a snapshot to our audience, ito po ang AC Health, and in our own little way, we're trying to do our best, to invest more in the sector, but B, to help our countrymen, especially both COVID and non-COVID patients during this crisis. What I'll do now is segue into what we've done throughout the crisis. If you can flip to the next page, please, Richmond. Throughout the crisis, actually during the crisis, we created what we called our 4T framework, and this has guided us throughout the Ayala Group in terms of taking care of our own employees as well as the communities that we serve. 4T is nothing complicated about it. I mean, everyone's been using it, but really triage, treatment, testing, and tracking. And of course, all founded on the ability to provide medical advice both to our group of companies, but as well as our other partners and our other accounts. I'll talk about this very quickly, but in triaging, this is where we've put to use our clinical network, and it served over 90,000 PUMs. PUMs to date and about 20,000 PUIs. I'll talk more about this in a second. But also in triaging, we created our own digital health platform. We call it Health Now. Ito po it's an all-in-one health app that allows consumers and patients to access their doctors and physicians through virtual means, through video. At the same time, order medicine, order lab services, and pretty much do anything that they can remotely. The second is in the field of treatment. And here, proud to say that, of course, we've leveraged our Generica network and our importation companies to be able to bring in medicine, basic medicine that's needed for the crisis. So vitamin C, ang mga flu shots po, lahat yan we offer now to our employees and the communities that we serve, and of course, make it available to our clinics for our fellow Filipinos. Also in treatment, I'll talk more about this later. We upgraded our Santa Rosa Hospital into a full COVID referral hospital. I'll mention that more later. The field of testing, I'll talk more about this later, but we invested in our own PCR labs and our own testing protocols, which has so far tested over 50,000 Ayala Group employees. And then finally, we put a lot of work into tracking and tracing and being able to monitor our data. Hopefully, I'll give a little glimpse of that to our audience over the next few slides. But maybe let me take one step at a time and one example at a time. Next page, please, Richmond. In the triage area, to reiterate, we've kept our family doc and our Healthway multi-specialty clinics open throughout the crisis. Actually, we only closed down one day, the first day of the lockdown, where we had to really rethink and mobilize ourselves. But we made a commitment and we had a mandate that we would keep our clinics open. And even if, of course, our employees we take care of, but they go to the clinics day in, day out and put themselves at risk to be able to cater to patients, both COVID and non-COVID patients. And as I mentioned, we've seen 20,000 PUIs and 90,000 PUMs. We've also used this crisis to pivot, so to speak, some of our clinics where we felt there was need. So for instance, in Healthway in Greenbelt, we converted a small portion of our Greenbelt Healthway clinic into a chemo infusion facility, recognizing that there were cancer patients that needed a place to get chemotherapy but could not go to the hospitals. So yun po yung mga examples on how we've kept our clinic network open. My thesis is to be able to support the hospitals as much as we can by providing extended frontline care. And in doing so, I think we're proud to say we've been able to meet so many patients for both their COVID-related referrals or non-COVID related care. Actually, on that note, maybe the next page will give our scientists some indication of the trends that we see in our clinics. I'd like to think that our clinics, because they're all over Metro Manila, they serve po as a leading indicator, if you will, of cases before they are registered by the DOH or before they are confirmed as actual cases. These charts show you the number of PUIs that we see every day, every week for the last 17 weeks in our clinics. It cut through at the start here, but it doesn't show the significant ramp up in March. Nung March po, napakalaki nung increase na nakita namin. Syempre, it really significantly increased. And then over the weeks of April, it started to stagnate and then started to increase again. And the lower chart shows our normal foot traffic, just so you can see the ratio of PUIs to foot traffic. So yung foot traffic namin medyo nag-stabilize na, pero medyo tumataas pa rin yung PUI count. So we're really seeing modest increases in cases, and I think it's an indication that we need to be vigilant, and we need to be able to detect these cases early on and monitor and treat those properly. But a benefit that we have, because we have the largest clinical network in the Philippines, and of course we're able to do a lot more data crunching with the electronic medical records that we have. I'll move on to the treatment side. Next page, please, Rich. On the treatment side, as I mentioned, medicine and vaccination programs that we offer. But more than that, proud to say, next page, please, Richmond, that we, very early in the crisis, we decided to upgrade Qualimed Santa Rosa into a COVID referral hospital. So, maliit lang po, pero nakakatulong kasi there were times in the crisis, and we see it again today, where capacities are getting more and more constrained. I'm sure it was mentioned in our panel earlier as well. While we do have the beds, and we're nearing 60, 70, 80% utilization of those beds across the country, our biggest bottleneck po is really in terms of the manpower. Many of our hospitals, including us, can convert non-COVID beds to COVID beds, but unfortunately, manpower po ang pinaka-bottleneck natin. Having said that, we're proud to say that we built this in record time. It's a 15-bed holding area, 15-bed ICU as well. Sorry, it's a 12, it's just a minor typo. It's a 12-bed holding area and 15-bed ICU. converted 30 beds for COVID patients only. And more importantly, we built a BSL-2 here too. No? I'll show you some statistics very quickly. Next page, please. As you can see, these are the capacities in the holding area, the COVID wards and the COVID ICUs. And over the last few weeks, as with every other hospital, tumataas po. No? And again, people ask me, what is that a function of? It's a function of three things. It's a function of forced GCQ. So you have more velocity of people out in the system. And it's of course, it's a function of cases also in other, not in our case, but in non-NCR areas. And then finally, it's a function of more testing. So we're finding more people today that have the virus. And of course, that leads to treatment protocols and confinement, even for moderate cases. No? But this is in line as the other trends we're seeing in our other hospitals. I'll move on to testing then, which is what I mentioned. Proud to say I thank you to Dr. Gisela and I know the scientist team that we have, because early on in the crisis, I asked them for advice now from the PAASE on how to go about testing. And very early on, we committed to invest in testing, first with rapid antibody tests, and then afterwards with confirmatory PCR tests. Next page, please. Over the last, actually more than 6 weeks, we've conducted the rapid testing for more than 55,000 employees. No? And it's given us, of course, rich data. These are using rapid tests. Ang protocol po namin, we worked on very deliberately, very carefully, very thoroughly. We would test our employees and those who would register as positive IgM. We would test through our confirmatory PCR laboratories. I think the experience over the last few weeks has given us more comfort and more confidence that we're able to keep infection rates relatively low. Next page, please, Richmond. Sorry, maybe before I get to the data, this is just to show the network of labs that we built for PCR testing. We've contributed 5,500 tests per day to the national requirement. Proud to say that all of our QualiMed laboratories in Laguna, Batangas, Iloilo, and Bulacan are now accredited, except for Batangas, but everything is accredited. We partnered with UC Med in Cebu, donated in Davao, and of course in Makati City, we partnered with the Tropical Disease Foundation, which has been operational since May, actually. But these give us the ability to do confirmatory PCR testing. And ang nangyari po, next page, please, Richmond. Sorry, sige, next page, please. Yes, thank you. So this is some data from our program, no? That shows what the incidence levels are or the prevalence rates are for our IgM pluses. So we have about 3% infection rate, 1.5, 1.6% for IgM positive. And makikita nyo po on the lower chart how that prevalence rate has increased over time. So as GCQ became more, I guess, more the norm, we see an increase here in the red line of 2.27 and the blue line as well. Interestingly, our positivity rate from the rapid test, the confirmatory rate, is very low. No, it's only 4.26%. So throughout this process, we've been able to identify a handful of PCR confirmed patients. But that said, we've also been able to confirm other PCR patients through other means. Next page, please. Ito po, this shows in the entire Ayala group, we have about 100 confirmed cases so far, and we track those on an individual basis. This is the subset of that 100 and how we recorded them. Some were tracked. Actually, more than half are asymptomatic. Half of those come from the rapid testing protocol. Half of those come from what we call close contacts, meaning close contacts of symptomatics, and the rest are from symptomatics. No, and so I think it's important to note that while rapid testing gives you a level of filtering, It's also very important to be able to track symptomatics right away and to be able to track close contacts immediately and test those close contacts immediately. Kasi doon po, nakikita po namin na medyo mas mataas ang positivity rate. But just to say, I think from our group, about 100 plus cases out of 50,000 employees, we've kept it relatively low. We have had cases of, pockets of infections. Yun po ang kailangan natin pantayan lahat, no? And happy to say that, I think over time we've learned to be more efficient too. So for instance, a BPI branch that catches an infection, we've learned to rapidly test the people that are there, sanitize the branch, and be able to open up with a team, with an alternative team on the next day, no? Kasi po ang pakiramdam namin sa private sector, ito na po ang new normal natin eh. No, so as long as, of course, the death rates are not spiraling out of control, as long as the hospitals are not getting overwhelmed, we will face a GCQ situation where you will have people get infected with the virus. No? And ang importante po is that we're able to detect those early and bring the business back quickly. No? Kasi po kung ma-detect natin na maaga, at least maagapan natin ang pag-spread. At saka more importantly, matutulungan natin yung pasyente to get the proper quarantine and the proper treatment protocols so that it doesn't get any worse. Next page, please. Just some data on our PCR testing. We're testing over 1,500 people in Makati and over 1,500 people in Santa Rosa. These numbers will just increase. Ito po yung sinasabi ko na tama po yung sabi ni Secretary Pernia na ang private sector contributed significantly to our lab capacity build out. And like us, we're experiencing a lot more tests. And of course, that leads to a lot more cases. A lot of these are asymptomatic cases. Meron po kami isang BPO na kliyente, may isang nag-symptomatic. In 1 week po, we were able to detect 50 employees in that BPO company who were positively confirmed. And so that adds on, of course, to our national totals. But to me, it's a good thing that we're able to test more people and that we're able to detect them sooner rather than later versus in the previous weeks and previous months where we were pretty much helpless. I hope that gives people a glimpse of the testing that we've done. Next page, please, Richmond. Maybe let me end, Doctora, with just some learnings. And yung sabi ko nga, maybe 3 things. Unang-una is how vital it is to be able to have early detection and of course to be able to administer timely response. These are key to controlling the spread. Kami po, we feel that we've been able to keep our prevalence rates low. Hard to guarantee that it will stay low forever. But at least when we do get cases, naagapan po namin na na-actionan kaagad. And more importantly, that we managed and treated these cases properly. No? Secondly, in the workplace, of course, there is no replacing social distancing, alternative deployment, safety and hygiene procedures. Lahat po yun ay absolutely essential. But nevertheless, mild outbreaks do happen. And it's very important that we remain vigilant in terms of triaging and testing because these do happen. And when they do, we need to be able to control it before it escalates. No? And then finally, of course, that an integrated care team in the corporate setting is so vital. No? And it's really a leadership position in partnership with every company's human resources department, but we've been working with many HR teams around the country, and we're so happy to say that in true partnership, we've been able to track cases and keep cases low, not just for the Ayala group, but for all of our partners, including some of the other consortium conglomerates and some of our multinational clients. Maybe let me end with 2 pages, Dr. Gisela, a step back in terms of how we think about the crisis. Our healthcare sector in general, para medyo big picture ng konti, and to reiterate what some of the messages that Secretary Pernia mentioned. Clearly, there was significant, I think, prior to the crisis, there was significant momentum already in the healthcare sector. And I wanted to make sure that people appreciated that and understood that, because that's the work that the DOH and our legislators have done before the crisis. Ito po, yung mga universal healthcare bill, yung cancer bill. Unfortunately, medyo nautlot because of the crisis, but we're hoping that momentum picks back up. That said, it is quite obvious that the pandemic has shown us the inadequacy of our healthcare system still, especially in dealing with the crisis. Insufficiency of facilities, whether it's inpatient ICU beds, laboratories, yun po, naalala po natin, RITM lang ang laboratorio dati. But there's also a lack of manpower, which is still glaring until today. And unfortunately, all of those lack of facilities and manpower is also not distributed geographically, at least equally. There also is a need for better coordination between and amongst the public and the private sector. Secretary Pernia alluded to that. And a lack of data capture and analytics, and ideally interoperable technology requirements. Nevertheless, ma'am, I'd like to emphasize that what we've learned throughout the crisis is, sabi nga ni Secretary, bayanihan po. Everyone is coming together. We're adjusting, we're adapting as needed. Been a fantastic collaboration actually with the public sector, with the DOH, the IATF, Project T3, headed by Secretary Charlie Galvez and Secretary Vince Dizon po. We've really rallied together both as a private sector and a public sector, and lahat na po ng sectors na nakipagtulong-tulong po, especially sa pag-upgrade ng ating testing. But I guess the fourth bullet here, ma'am, and I'd like to emphasize this for our audience because this is what Secretary Pernia also alluded to. Napaka-importante po ng healthcare as a sector in terms of nation building. And if that's not obvious to people today, I hope it is moving forward. And kami po sa Ayala, it's renewed our efforts and our own commitment to the sector. And as Jaza had mentioned, it's an industry that we will continue to invest in through the crisis and hopefully post the crisis. Kung meron pong post the crisis. But throughout the crisis, we're investing heavily in the sector. I'll end with our vision for the healthcare sector for the future, Doctora. Next page, please, Rich. Given everything that we've gone through, everything that we're going through today, we strongly believe that the healthcare sector will face massive disruption and massive consolidation. But most importantly, we'll need massive investment. And kami po, we're committed to investing in the sector moving forward. We think there are significant capacity and capability building requirements across the sector. So both in hard infrastructure and soft infrastructure. We're seeing a lot of already today organic and inorganic opportunities po, and we feel there are opportunities for partnership and consolidation within healthcare. But most importantly, our thesis is more than ever, the healthcare industry of the future will require large, integrated, synergistic ecosystems. And by doing so, we would be able to bring more affordable medicine, more affordable services to millions of Filipinos na nangangailangan po. Our thesis for the future is four things. One, the emergence of distributed clinical networks for even broader reach, deeper reach to communities, families, and employees, giving care where care is needed and where patients need them. So ito po, tutuloy po namin ang Family Doc, ang Healthway, at ang pagbubukas po ng mga clinics na mas malapit sa mga tao, kung saan sila nakatira, kung saan tayo kinakailangan. Secondly, investing in hospitals. We need large-scale specialty hospitals. So for instance, our cancer hospital that we're building. At the same time, smaller multi-specialty hospitals in Tier 2 cities, such as what we have in Parliament. And we'll look to build more of those moving forward. Number three po, napaka-importante, affordable diagnostics, affordable medicines for even more Filipinos. And our commitment is to build generica even more, build lab services and other diagnostic products and services even more. And then finally, napakalaking opportunity po ng digital health. At saka, I'm sure Chris and some of the other scientists here in the data field will appreciate that there is huge potential in data analytics in the healthcare sector. And the opportunity to tie all of these together with electronic medical records, patient data, that then gives us better insight into population healthcare, barangay trends, which will help not just in this crisis, but in future pandemics and in controlling chronic conditions, whether it's diabetes or hypertension. So yun po, I'd like to end by saying thank you very much to PAASE for inviting me. Happy anniversary to the group. And rest assured that the private sector is committed to the healthcare industry. And we at Ayala are one with the government and one with the academe and the scientific community in trying to beat this virus and hopefully overcome. Yeah, maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Paolo, for sharing with us your vision, your thesis, like a true academic, Paolo. Your wish list, lots of valuable insights and lessons from Paolo from the private sector that academia can learn from. Thanks for sharing with us the 40's integrated strategies and initiatives that the Ayala Group has undertaken to cope with the challenges posed by COVID-19. Also, the infrastructure and manpower you built. So for data analytics, I understand Reyna is with you, Paolo. Is that right? Yes. And this bring a great number of your employees back to the workforce, keep the prevalence of COVID-19 low, also to help the surrounding communities. I also noted that you're continuing to take care of other illnesses like cancer, because cancer, diabetes patients, and other infectious disease patients are somewhat neglected during this time of COVID. I would like to note the significant amount of investment you're making to protect your employees, which should make you the model and leader for the rest of the business sector to follow. Thank you, Paolo. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give Paolo a rousing virtual round of applause. I understand, Paolo, you are ready to leave for the hospital in Batangas that you visited. But if there are any questions from the audience at this point, maybe it is important for us to ask the questions now. Any questions from the audience, because Paolo might leave, whereas the panel, Dr. Pernia, and the rest of us can stay. Okay, here are some comments from Des Hotea. Great work of the Ayala Group, great presentation, Paolo. Lots of lessons learned, which could be emulated by other sectors. Let me tell you, Paolo, that Des Hotea and others from UP Los Baños have had their COVID testing center certified by the DOH.
That's right.
And remember that we were offering that your people could be tested. They could be trained in UP Los Baños, okay, for testing. So this is now operational. Okay, so other comments, Rodel Subade. What are your plans for expansion of services for our COVID patients outside Ayala to respond to the ongoing spikes in confirmed cases? This can be a good model for other companies. What are your plans for sharing this with other companies? Is there any? Maybe DTI can team up for this co-learning.
Yes, po. We've been working closely with the DOH. In fact, Secretary Duke is visiting Qualimed next week, and also in touch with the DTI. And we've been very open po with our industry associations. in terms of sharing the learnings that we have been having and we have been learning over the last few weeks. And we're happy to continue providing information. In fact, we work with a lot of other companies today, both large conglomerates, multinationals, pati pong SMEs. We've offered our testing services to SMEs and our advice to SMEs.
Okay. So in another company, seemed to result in increase in number of COVID-19 cases. There are many possible reasons: psychology, false security, more complacent to net increase in external community, hence more cases. Any perspective? Do you do longitudinal testing?
Yes, we do, Chris. We do longitudinal testing because we test people on a weekly or an every other week basis. Siguro kami, well, I'm sure there's some false security there, but we really made it a point to say testing does not make one invincible. And it does not replace the basic hygiene and social distancing protocols. So we kept that spirit high across the Ayala Group and for many of our clients. That said, I do think that more testing undoubtedly leads to more cases. And that's just the nature of it. But beyond that, there are cases where you do have mini outbreaks. And those are the situations that you want to be hopefully get under control sooner rather than later.
Okay, there's another question here, or comment. I would like to see how the Ayala model can inform the opening of classes. It's a little tough, but
yeah, you know, it's mahirap po. We're actually monitoring the data as we speak. Like I said, this recent increase in cases is worrying many people, rightfully so. I think what we have to see is what is the trend moving forward. Will it continue to spike and at exponential levels, in which case it will overwhelm our capacity? I tend to look at three things from a data perspective because I'm sure people can get very overwhelmed. One is I've focused more on the death rates rather than the case rates per se, but to make sure that our death rates are controllable, because at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we're protecting our people. The second is the severity rates. So how bad are the cases that are being registered? And right now, thankfully, it's fairly low. And then the third is, of course, the supply rate. So meaning the occupancy levels at our hospitals. Because if your death rates are going up, if your severity rates are going up, and your hospital capacities are getting used up, those three things are ripe for disaster po. So yun po ang binabantayan namin.
okay, thank you, Paolo. I think Des Sotea is very enthusiastic about pursuing collaboration with the Ayala Group. So
yes,
you might consider, yes, getting more people trained for testing in UP Los Baños.
Yes. No, please. Actually, ito po, if I could also challenge the PAASE, this is really our biggest challenge as a sector. We can spend money to build beds and to build more ICUs and bring in more ventilators. But it's not as easy to just put in money and expect that you get tens, hundreds of doctors and nurses immediately po. And so, of course, digital helps, but nothing replaces priority in terms of training, incentives in terms of learning for our students and soon to be medical practitioners. Napaka-importante po nun.
Okay. So I'm sorry, we will have to, soon end the Q&A here, Paolo and everyone. Hey, there's an off-tangent question here. Off-tangent. Would Ayala be interested in investing in UP Diliman, Philippine General Hospital that is being planned?
You know, I'm of course close to Dr. Legaspi, and if there are opportunities for public-private partnership, we'd be happy to explore those. I know they're also looking at public-private partnerships in PGH for the cancer wing, and we'd be more than happy to look at those. I mean, UP PGH is a fantastic institution, and obviously, we're honored. We'd be honored to work with our colleagues from the UP-PPH.
I think that's important because what the UP Manila PGH would have would be the specialists, the manpower. It is the most critical part of your any development. So thank you very much again, Paolo. And I think we learned a lot from your talk. And I think it substantiates what Secretary Ernie wanted to put across to all of us, that there should be trustful, synergistic, private-public partnerships. Okay, so with that, I would like to move to the next short talk. Paolo, bye-bye, and have a good trip to your hospital in Batangas. Okay, so at this point, I would like to share with you some of the initiatives of PAASE to help stem COVID-19. And it's really also to acknowledge the persons who helped us in our efforts. So I would like to share my screen. Please bear with me for a short while. And okay. Do you see my screen now?
No. No, ma'am.
Just a while. Just a while. Okay, so I just like to start off by well, affirming. I think most of us will join me in saying that we have some strengths in PAASE, and that would be our great openness and dynamism of exchanges within PAASE. And then while we have divergent opinions and views, scientific views for some matters, we show mutual respect to one another. We do have a broad range of expertise with lots of young blood, and we are composed of multi-universities, therefore also multi-perspectives. So we have public and private universities, and then some of our members are in NAST, in government, and are linked with government and the private sector. Most of all,
Giselle, you may want to put it in presentation mode. The slides.
Well, it is in presentation mode as
okay.
Fine. Okay.
No, we're
yeah.
From our end, it's 50%.
Well, so
right,
I don't know why.
Okay.
It's you are screen sharing, and it's I put in my full PowerPoint. So anyway, so I thought that you would be able to read this well. But anyway, I think I wanted to just, well, then read out most of it or explain what's in the slides. So we welcome discourses with and acknowledge contributions of non-PAASE colleagues who shared S&T vision. And we did this a lot during COVID-19, where we invited non-PAASE members into our Google Group discussions. So PAASE espouses inclusivity. So, well, like everyone else in the world, we panicked. We were worried about COVID-19 at the onset, and we tried to move fast. So we assessed developments, continued reading articles, scientific preprints, and publications. We gave webinars. It's ongoing. We're now on webinar number 17 or 18. We expressed our opinions, took positions, offered advice, and took actions. And we tried best to base it on scientific evidence. So the first thing we did was to come up with a statement on COVID. And the persons who helped us formulate this statement are Rodelio Subade, Edna Ko, and myself. And we focused on three areas of interventions for COVID-19 would be containment and mitigation, immediate, short to medium term, medium to long term interventions, advice, then triage and treatment, and mass testing and fast tracking. And these three general themes were substantiated with 17 PAASE bulletins on these three topics. And we shared with Secretary Pernia our advice, our proposals, so that he could share them as needed with government, particularly the IATF. Okay. So let me now tell you a bit about the early days of COVID. We formed a group, and I did not invite the members of this core group. Vic Ilag, Larry Ilag, Homer Pantua, Al Serafica, Pia Bagamasbad, and Chris Monterola, we naturally came together because they were responsive to our call. So by March 19, we had a letter addressed to Secretary Duque, okay, which I delivered, and it addressed the need for testing. And because in this group, we had Homer, we had Pia, we had Vic, we knew that we had the capability to come up with an RT-PCR kit that was on par with the WH RT-PCR reference kit. And we could produce it by ordering in bulk the components of the kit. But we knew also that the UP-NIH RT-PCR kit was on its way. And so we were also in constant communication with Raul Destura. And well, we offered to provide the RNA extraction kit, which is missing in this kit, or would be maybe insufficient in quantity, as well as in other foreign kits that were imported. Okay? And we could provide it at a lower cost because we would order in bulk. Also, we were made aware that the Philippine Genome Center was ready to be certified for as a testing center by the DOH and the RITM. So we made representations with Secretary Duque and others to get the PGC on its track for certification, because at that time it was only the UP NIH that was certified aside from the RITM. What's wonderful is that there were 100 volunteers. They were MBB practitioners from UP Diliman and UP Los Baños who were gathered together by Ray Garcia of UP Diliman and IMBB. And so together with the training and the advocacy for getting more training and testing centers supported by the DOH, together with Cynthia Saloma, Ray Garcia, Pia Bagamasbad, Des Hautea, and Sean Raimundo, who worked on the UP Los Baños Testing Center, we are able to get them certified. And now we have 67 licensed RT-PCR laboratories all over the country. And early on also, we had John De Castro, Salvador Kawili, and National Scientist Luli Cruz presenting to us their plan for sample pooling for diagnostics in low-resource areas. And in fact, we were able to present this sample pooling strategy to Paolo and the Ayala Health Group. So let me now move to another initiative that we had, which Al Serafica already described, and that was to champion CEPID, and he already talked about it. But I think, you know, we have to recognize Al's initiative, because through the Philippine Science for Progress, Philippine Business for Progress, we were actually able to get information on those DOH TB DOTS centers with gene expert machines. And we were able to get information on contact persons, and PAASE members were ready to help train or learn from the personnel in those TB DOTS. So we were offering ourselves as a support group. And also, when we were trying to get the safety kits imported to the country, we were in constant communication with Secretary Pernia, Secretary Duque, and Secretary Pernia to Secretary Locsin. And just to complete the circle, we wrote the U.S. ambassador, the Philippine ambassador to the United States in Washington, D.C., through our colleagues, our UP alumni in San Francisco, through the San Francisco consulate. So we actually, completed the circle, and we were very happy when we learned about the first shipment of Cephin. Now we know that it's not coming in as much as many as we expected because of the demand in the United States, but there are 22 licensed gene expert labs in the country. And I think that's quite impressive. So here you have the number of tests done by the DOH count. And I think that that's something that will increase in the weeks to come.
Gisela,
excuse me,
could
sorry,
you
Gisela?
click on slideshow? Slideshow to magnify.
Okay, just a while. Do you see it now?
Gisela,
Yes.
I think maybe.
It's on the full screen. Okay, just a moment. I will just expand this thing if it does not show. So is this what you see?
It's too big. Yeah.
Well, because when I click the slideshow, it has been on the slideshow, but you know, looks like still does not work. Is that
That's
okay?
okay. That's better. That's better.
Okay, I'm so sorry about that. But I had clicked on the slideshow.
Okay, thank you,
Right.
Gisela.
Okay. So anyway, this.
Edsel, I think you can just go to view options.
Okay. Yeah. So well, this is the third slide, and I just wanted to tell you that these are the titles of the bulletins that were prepared, and each of them has its own author. So I'm saying that this is not, you know, fully PAASE endorsed or endorsed by everyone in PAASE. Each one of these bulletins has its own authors and the scientific references, which we required for each bulletin. And I don't have the authors here, but these are all available in our website. Okay, and some of them are co-authored with non-PAASE members. So containment and mitigation and water, Francis de los Reyes, back to economic normality, Noel Miranda, nutrition to fight COVID, Vic Ilag, avoid economic harm, that's Noel again, hand hygiene, that's Joey Florencio, triage and treatment, drugs to treat COVID, Vic Ilag, TB vaccine, this is, I think, Vic Ilag and maybe Larry Ilag. Need for a low-cost ventilator. It's multi-authored. It's led by Gobet Advincula. This PAASE, PASUC, San Agustin dashboard, co-authored by me and Rodel Subade and Jong De Castro and Tirso Ronquillo, president of the Philippine Association of State Universities and Colleges. COVID Pilot Testing Center, Mario Santo Domingo, Sean Raimundo, Desert Hotea. Sample pooling, this is by Jong De Castro, Badong Kawili, and others, Luli Cruz. DOH DOTS testing centers for COVID. This is us with Serafica, our core group. Rapid antibody test. Here now, when this started coming in, we came up with a PAASE bulletin with Gani Padolina. And then we have this again from COVID testing center to pooling with John De Castro, mass testing, that's our core group again, increasing RT-PCR, this is us, our core group. And finally, we came up with a bulletin on an analytical validation test of lateral flow or rapid antibody kits, reference to ELISA, reference to RT-PCR. So then we also had this education, capacity building and training materials, and we posted on our website seminars of UP system, UP Manila, as well as those from De La Salle. And we have this in Philippine Science Letters. And then, of course, we have our webinars that are ongoing, hosted by former President Kathleen K. Aviso. So in the latter days, so when there was lots of talk on ease of lockdown towards economic recovery, there was a call from Secretary Pernia for PAASE members to come up with proposals on how to get the economy back, okay, through ease of lockdown. And we have young faculty of the UP School of Economics who were writing articles, okay, and publishing them. We have Marjorie Paharon and Sarah Dawai Bucanes and others. Then we brainstormed in our group, and by this time we had Gani Padolina of Pascal Pharma as an important member of our group, and we listened to Edsel Silvania and Tony Dans of the NAST, and then we tried to give advice to the private sector because they needed this kind of advice, even if they had their own plans. So we actually came up with a bulletin which indicated that for return to work, we would recommend only the essential on-the-ground workforce. And then we wanted the robust, healthy ones who would be about 20 to 50 years old. In case they got infected, they would have a better chance of fighting COVID. Then it is implied that they would have no COVID-19 contact, no comorbidities like diabetes, cardiovascular disease, no high-risk conditions, and that they're asymptomatic, and then they would undergo tests and it would be negative. And then in the workplace, they would practice physical and social distancing of about 6 feet or 2 meters. And in the workplace, there would be a staggered low-density work schedule and seating in the workplace and in the vehicle. So it came hand in hand with well, the transport, the transportation of the employees. So at this point, let me tell you that there is a special person who connected us to the Ayala Health Group. First, Gani Padolina of Pascal Pharma linked with Rizzi Alejandro of Ayala Health. And then my dear friend from grade school to high school, her name is Luli Eras de Leon. She is a immediate past president of the Ayala Foundation Incorporated. She linked me up with Paolo Borromeo. So thank you, Luli, Gani, Rizzi. And aside from Ayala Health, I had great opportunity to give Luli, who's now in private sector, some advice for her own company. Okay. So anyway, let me just tell you about the testing that's also contained in our bulletin. So, and this is also based on the advice of our MDs. So we would recommend a 14-day clinical symptoms test, and then antibody and RT-PCR test kits using ones with high performance specifications. And we wanted to assert that we would have to know the performance specifications, and they would have to be very, very good. We would then, well, under certain circumstances, promote or do a good sample pooling with a good design, but that would mean that there would be a good sampling method. Then we recommended periodic multi-time point testing. Of course, that's a bigger investment, but it is worth it. Would be administered by health workers, and there would be quarantine of positives, not just stay home, quarantine of positives. Okay, so the people who helped us here, Gani Padolina, Vic Ilag, Homer Pentua, Noel Miranda, Joyce Ibana, Anika Padolina, Delisay Maligali, and Erniel Barrios. So now I'd like to say that Gani Padolina in Pascal Pharma has implemented what we had recommended for his own company. And by this time, there was a very high performance kit that was made available in the country, and it had a sensitivity of 100% and a specificity of 99.8%. So that if you had 1,000 people and assumed a 1% incidence, that would mean that 10 have COVID, 990 have no COVID, and at 100% sensitivity, that would mean 10 are true positives, 0 are false negatives, and at a 99.8% specificity, you'd have 998 that are true negatives and 2 that are false positives. And we know what the implications of false positives are and false negatives are. And so if you decrease the sensitivity and the specificity by a bit or a lot, then these numbers will change. Okay, so the way GANI, understand, implements it in Pascal Pharma is they do the 14-day test for work clearance. They are using the Alexis Roche test, and they do it twice in 14 days or weekly. And the positives are quarantined, and then they take the RT-PCR test. So this is something that we thought would be like best effort, but then you know how the science changes over time, and that is, I think, what the role of the PAASE is ultimately. It's to alert the government, the business sector, ourselves, academia, on latest published literature, and well, we take it from there because there's just so many unknowns in this time of COVID. Okay, so aside from Ayala Health, the ones who had sought our advice is the Go Negosyo Group. And recently, I was asked to be a panelist in a Balik Kabuhayan webinar. But before I go to that part, let me just say that more recently, we came up with another initiative. And this is because we wanted to thank our frontliners at the UPPGH. And so I posted a photo of Dr. Joey La Peña in his complete PPE together with his team. And it elicited a lot of response from our PAASE members wanting to help on the ground. And so we decided that we would come up with a PPE campaign, but not to PGH because PGH was receiving a lot of PPE donations already, same with San Lazaro Hospital and the private hospitals. So in particular, we decided that we would make underserved COVID-19 hospitals and other facilities in the country as our beneficiaries. Of course, it is a lot more challenging, but we wanted to, well, I have, excuse me, to get 3 more people into the, to the conference, okay? So anyway, so back to this. So we embarked on this, and so together with PAASE President Tirso Ronquillo and Serafica, we conceptualized it together with John De Castro and Nelo Aguila of University of San Agustin Center of Bioinformatics. So John is a Balik scientist of the DOST, and he's serving San Agustin in Iloilo. And so John came up with a dashboard based on how we plan to do this. And so the dashboard is available at the PAASE website, the PASUC website, and the UCSA website. And since then, we've had many requests from these underserved hospitals through their key informants who were identified by state universities and colleges near them. So the role of SUCS in this initiative is central. So let me now recognize our private partners who've helped us, aside from PAASE and CFI of San Agustin and the SUCS. We have donors. We have a huge donor, Care of Tirso Ronquillo, who donated tens of thousands of units. okay, that constitute the PPE. We have the Federation of Filipino Chinese Commerce and Industry as a major donor, and the Rotary Club of Makati as major donor. And then when we got all of these donations, Tiersa and I, we put them in boxes. We had to allocate them properly. And it was no longer based on the needs of the requested numbers of the hospitals. The DOH, the Office of Civil Defense, met with us, and they advised us also to verify these numbers and to also consider the number of healthcare workers and hospital beds in these hospitals. Okay, so once these boxes are already ready for shipment, we thought, it'd be easy to ship them out. We had them in 2 storage places, and then we realized, hey, it's gonna cost us. It's gonna cost us to send this. So the first 6 boxes I was in charge of, they are to Sultan Kudarat, to Catbalogan, Cotabato City, to Bontoc, and to Gegarao, and 1 to Haro. And when I went to Airspeed to check the price of this shipment, it cost 31,000. Okay, 31,000. And so, with the help of our PAASE Vanguard, Father Ben Nebres, through the Ateneo Donation Group, we are able to get a 15% discount from Airspeed. Okay, so I'd like to thank our PAASE Vanguards for helping us. So Rotary Club of Makati is through PAASE Vanguard former President Fred Pascual. So we'd like to thank everyone who contributed to this effort. And now the first 6 boxes are on their way to these underserved hospitals. So I'd just like to end by telling you that we were invited to participate in this Balik Kabuhayan. So I think this is in line with the Sec Ernie's call to economic recovery. And the viewers there were from MSMEs, co-ops, LGUs, okay? And in that forum were Joey Concepcion, Congressman Joey Salceda, Congresswoman Jeanette Garin, myself, Dr. Raymond Law of Philippine Children's Medical Center, and then Josephine Gotianumia from the private sector, and Dr. Gita Padilla as a moderator. And we were moderating, Karen Davilo was there. So here you'll just see the other recommendations that I made, and I'd like to point out protection, hygiene, nutrition, immune testing, immune boosting, prophylaxis, and treatment, because I already told you about return to work and mass transport and testing. And so here we have signages, flyers. You know, some companies in foreign countries, they put the signages on the floor so that people who walk, from room to room will remember the reminders. Okay, signages on the floor, flyers, seminars, constant reminders, and best practices. We already know mask protection. There is this suggestion to consider betadine, povidone, salt-saline gargles. Okay, they're relatively cheap. Then, of course, good ventilation, dry, clean air exchange. The WHO reminds us to avoid the 3 C's, the crowded, close contact, and confined spaces. Then we are reminded to eat a healthy, balanced green and fish diet. And there's this bulletin by the ILAG on what's the value of a fish oil diet. And I think it's related to the VCO diet as well. Okay, vitamins, minerals, food supplements, and food supplements. Now I'd like to focus on this BCG TB vaccine. And I think that at this point, we cannot say that, we will just ignore this, because recently there was an important paper published in the US proceedings of the National Academies of Science that says that there seems to be a significant difference in populations that had received BCG vaccination versus those who had not in their response to COVID-19. So I say this is still an open question. And the vaccine trials, BCG vaccine trials in Australia will be ending in a month or so. Finally, on the treatment, hydroxychloroquine, zinc, azithromycin, steroids, Avigan, remdesivir. I think now it's only remdesivir that's being considered for treatment. But then recently again, there was a major paper. I think it's a substantive paper that's telling us that hydroxychloroquine treated cases, showed good results. Okay, so anyway, I think we should keep an open mind about these interventions as scientists. Okay, the rest are things that are already covered by the rest of our panel discussants, and therefore I would not wish to repeat them. I just wanted to say that holistically or maybe psychologically, we should think of a change in the goals, attitudes, and mindset. And we could actually consider the MSMEs as transformative agents in society if the management would impose these things or would make sure that these precautions are taken in the company, then perhaps the employees could then bring this all the way to their homes, to their families. So psychological and physical health and welfare, I think it's time to simplify our lifestyle and aspirations. Then we should think of efficient, sufficient productivity to earn a living and provide healthy, quality goods and services to society. Okay, so we have to rethink the products and services that we would prioritize during this time of COVID and make sure that they are good, not only for ourselves, but also for the rest of society and also for the environment. So I think it's time to think also of the circular economy. Okay, so I'd like to end with this. This is from Anthony Fauci, okay, from the NIAID of the US National Institute of Health. The more things we can all do to mitigate our risk of exposure, the better off we are all, in my opinion. Not only does it flatten the curve and allow health care providers to maintain levels of service that aren't immediately and catastrophically overwhelmed, it also reduces unnecessary suffering and deaths. And I think this is important, buys time for the scientific community to study the virus in order to come to a more full understanding of the breadth of its impacts in both the short and long term. I do not think there is a shortcut in the way, there's no short path in our understanding the virus in its totality. So let us be patient and let us resolve to work with one another to try to overcome the challenges, the difficulties that this pandemic has brought upon us. I'd like to end with this photo of Elon Musk, okay, Starlink over the heavens, and it's actually confounding astronomy, the studies in astronomy, but I think it gives us like a glimmer of hope on how science and technology might be able to pave the way for a better life for all of us in the future. For one, this would help in the connectivity amongst all of us. So thank you very much for listening to my talk. And at this point, let us then move on to the Q&A. If there are more questions to the panel, and to Secretary Pernia and myself, we can entertain these questions now. Thank you. Yes. Okay, so all right. So I think everyone is just doing well wishes to everyone else, and let's see if there are more questions. Okay, beyond the questions for Paolo. All right. All right, so I think at this point, we're ready to call it a day, call it a morning and evening. It's been a long meeting. It's our first. And I am sorry that there are a few glitches in my case. You know, my slide show was pressed, but it didn't show. But I guess it was mostly to acknowledge the contributions of our PAASE members to our COVID effort. So may I then maybe ask some of you to, you know, pose a few parting words, perhaps start with Ernie. Ernie, would you like to say something?
Yes, well, I'm really very gratified with, you know, being able to get engaged in this PAASE annual meeting and symposium. And as you know, I was really very enthusiastic about getting science and technology promoted vigorously in the 10-point agenda of this administration. It was first 8-point agenda, and I added vigorously promoting science and technology and the culture and the arts, and it was accepted by the cabinet, and then that led to the crafting of the Philippine Development Plan, in which there's also a whole chapter on vigorously promoting science and technology and innovation. So I'm glad that before I left the cabinet, I was able to have the idea of science and technology innovation ecosystem engraved in the hearts and minds of people in government. I hope it will be sustained. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ernie. Anybody else wants to say a few parting words? Al Serafica, other PAASE presidents like Alvin Culaba. Okay. Yes, Alvin, would you like to say something?
I'll just say thank you very much for organizing this, Gisela, and Secretary Pernia, for your very enlightening as well as demanding presentation from all of us to continue the fight. And we're only indeed halfway in terms of staying healthy, but really we have to rebuild the economy. And that's the next phase of our efforts on how to use indeed science to help the country be able to recover from this pandemic economically as well. So thank you very much for everyone for staying all this time. That's it.
Okay, Alvin, a few words. Francis, would you like to say something? Vice President? Alvin.
Well, congratulations, Giselle and the entire PAASE team. Great to start the 40th anniversary of PAASE and our 2020 APAMS here in Manila. So it's a long way to go. This is just a start of a long journey together. So we hope to achieve for the best of the science and technology community between, the Philippines and our partners in the US and the entire, world. So we look forward to an engaging discussions in the next, how many more? Is this just the first day? We have the whole month until the 14th of August. So we look for your active participation. Thank you and good morning. And thank you, Secretary Ernie and the rest of the presenters. Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody? Francis? Then maybe we could ask National Scientist Luli Cruz. We have here PAASE eminent member Bobby Mariano. Anyone who now wants to speak can speak. Lisa Virata, our former chairman of the board. So just feel free to say a few words if you wish. Then we will end the meeting in about maybe 10 minutes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so first of all, congratulations on this opening, Giselle, and thank you, Secretary Pernia, for that wonderful talk. Lots to think about. I think I just wanted to address the audience too, and the PAASE members and even the non-PAASE members. We're in a new world. We're doing Zoom. We're doing this online conference. And as scientists, we are also open to making this better, evolving this. So if you have any comments, if you have any suggestions to how to make this better, I'm sure we're going to get better and better over time. We have the whole month to do this. So hopefully, we'll take care of all the glitches and it will be smooth and efficient and also highly interactive. So thank you for everyone's patience.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll wait a few minutes. Anyone who wants to say something, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'd like to say something.
Yes, Windell, that's you, right?
Yes. I'm thankful for this organization for making information as widely distributed as possible and for going beyond science but even practically helping. And I'm grateful also to our president, Dr. Concepcion. One thing I really appreciate is that you encourage even minute ideas and encourage them to be developed. So thank you very much. I hope the future leadership will be like that, to really source out ideas and insights from members and to keep them growing so that we become effective. Kalaman at hagam para sa bayan. Salamat po.
Well, thank you. But I always say, Rodel, an organization is only as good as its members. Okay? So the more active participation is of the members, the better the organization will be. So that's what we're trying to grow in PAASE. At this point, I'd like to acknowledge one very special person. He's like our PAASE adopted member. His name is Richmond Pancho. Richmond Pancho is all-around guy. He's the one managing everything, doing our website, and then he tried very best. He tried to get this improve us going. This so Richmond, he's part-time in PAASE. So Richmond is valuable, and I'd like to thank you very much, Richmond, for the presence of everyone.
Thanks, ma'am. My pleasure to work with PAASE.
Richmond. Okay, so if there are no more comments, maybe call it a morning, a day. Thank you very much all for joining us today. See you tomorrow. Okay, there are 3 parallel sessions tomorrow, and please register in all of them or in your favorite one. Thank you. Bye-bye. I'll end the meeting now. Bye.